You had a chance to look at the film. Was the defense as bad as you first felt yesterday? And how can you fix this thing so quickly on the defensive side? Is it guys just communicating? Is it a personnel change? I mean, do you have a grasp of how you're going to try fixing that, kind of on the run, really?
Yeah, Joe, I thought a couple things. One, I think I may have mentioned this after the game. I didn't think from a backcourt standpoint that we really controlled the ball very well. And we've got to get into the ball. I thought we were trying to make decisions at screens to go over or under, and there was no physicality on the ball. I do think in some of the rim protection piece, I think, Vuce is figuring all that out in terms of the coverage, the calls, those kind of things. How high should he be up? Where should he be? What we're trying to do. I mean, we got the basic things in for him going into the game. But I think it's something we can fix. But to your point, the defense was bad last night. And it really started in transition, to be quite honest. That's where it really started. We were not great in transition. And then I thought, the ball really got downhill. Now, in fairness to our guys, I did think that they made a lot of mid-range pull-up jumpers over us. But the problem was we could have overcome that. What we couldn't overcome was the amount of points we gave them in transition, points off our turnovers, and then the plays where we had, to your point, broken coverage in pick and roll where the ball just got downhill and got to the rim. So it was something we focused on today and worked on today, but it was not good on film, to your point.
Will it be anything different with obviously you've got a new body now and a body that is the defensive anchor. Do you know how exactly you want to use them, or are you going to kind of feel this thing out and see how it goes?
In terms of, you mean Daniel, Joe?
Yeah, Daniel. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think he's obviously been a really good rim protector. He's got great physicality. He gives us another front court player at the rim to protect and to rebound. So, we've got Thad in the front court that has been in the rotation. Lowry been in the rotation. Vuce in the rotation. Now, obviously, Daniel. So, obviously, mixing and matching those guys will be important. I do think that we can be better at the point of the screen. I think that's generally where you get into a lot of trouble. And as much as we were, gave up stuff at the rim, I don't know if the entire onus falls on our bigs all the time, because we just never controlled the ball. And it's so hard when you're a big guy and you're standing there with your back to the basket and the guard is facing the basket and those guys are coming just straight downhill at you. We've got to do a better job. And the other thing too, I think for Vuce, he's figuring out, I think, positioning, spacing, how high he should be up on the screen, where he needs to be on the floor. There were times that he was way, way back in a drop and he was kind of just like sitting back there as guys were coming at him, and trying to get him to move up a little bit higher, I think could help. So I think those are things that we can tweak and change, and hopefully through repetition and then us being together, we can figure some of those things out.
Thanks, Billy.
You're welcome.
Cody, go ahead.
Billy, when it comes to big man pairings, like how open are you to switching those game to game, given that you have four guys now, and some people would argue that maybe with Vuce as your starting center, that Tice would be a better pairing some nights with him for his defensive reasons. And I don't just mean starting, but I just mean pairing him up throughout the game in total.
Yeah, I think we've got to look at all that stuff. We're coming out of one game right now where Lowry and Thad and Vuce all at different points in times played with each other during the game. I haven't seen that yet. There's sometimes I think things look good in theory, but you're never really going to quite know until you actually experiment or explore it. I do think Daniel's the kind of player that, can play with multiple guys. Lowry, because his skill set, can do the same thing. I've always said, about Thad, he always kind of gets his game and what he does into the game on most nights. Vuce is obviously a flexible front court guy. The biggest thing that ends up happening is, who you're playing with on the other team. What do the matchups look like from that standpoint? And then how well, do guys function, together? I think Daniel's always been a guy that, has had great presence and physicality at the basket. Lowry's been a guy that's stretched the floor, so to speak, and is, played off the perimeter, and moving and cutting, and then also putting it on the floor. So, how does that work? And how does that? So we're going to have to figure all that stuff out. I think that's going to be really, really important. But what I don't want to do is, one, on a small sample size of the San Antonio game, and then two, Daniel getting here now, just to pass judgment on potential opportunities of things that could potentially transpire, or what looks good and what doesn't look good. I think it'd be very, very easy to, just take it on paper and see, okay, this looks good, let's do it. But we've just actually got to see how it works in the games as well.
Casey, go ahead.
Billy, I can't help but notice that you've got chairs that are socially distanced behind you. I don't know if that's a ballroom or a film room for you guys. And maybe I shouldn't be surprised, but do you guys have to be socially distanced in team meetings, even though you're testing every day?
Yes.
Wow.
That's what it would look like for a team meeting right there. That's what it looks like. Yep.
Yeah.
We practiced today, so that was good. We didn't have to sit in here all day today.
Not that you wouldn't love that either, but I did have another question, just because I just observed that. But you've obviously been in some really high-profile matchups with Steph Curry over the years, and he's been upgraded to questionable for tomorrow. And regardless of if he plays or not, what's your appreciation level and respect level for a guy that's, in some ways kind of revolutionized the game like he has?
Yeah, to me, there's so much more to him than the shooting, and the shooting is spectacular. And I don't know if the game has ever seen a shooter quite like him, but everybody knows what he does. And to me, the thing that no one talks about is his stamina and his conditioning to continually run and move and cut and play. And then there are times that he does all that stuff, not for himself, but he does it for his teammates. And he gets guys open because of that and does things because of it. And, a lot of guys maybe in his situation could be really, really frustrated, about having to work as hard as he has to work. I think that's the one thing I really admire, is how hard he's willing to work to play at an elite level. And obviously, he's teams want to make him have to defend, where he's just not having to just rely on and resting on offense or playing offense, but try to make him play both ends of the floor. He plays both ends of the floor to the best of his ability. So that's the thing that stands out to me more than anything else, is one, the intelligence, the savviness, the understanding of what he has to do to impact his team and put his team in position to win.
Thanks, Billy.
You're welcome.
Last question, Darnell, go ahead.
Thanks, Tim. Billy, I got two for you. How are you tonight, first of all?
I'm doing good. How are you doing? Okay?
I'm doing all right.
Good.
The trade for Vooch, at what point, it had been reported that you guys had been kind of talking about that. Maybe you weren't involved in it, but that the team had been talking about it for a couple weeks now. At what point did you all as a staff make a decision that we're going to go for this thing? And by this thing, I mean the playoffs. And now that you guys have made this move, how should that change the mindset? How would you like for that to change the mindset of this roster?
Yeah, well, I think I may have mentioned this, Darnell, right after some of the trades happened. I think in the position that Mark and Arturis are in, where they're fielding phone calls, taking phone calls, communicating, talking, you find out what teams may be interested in on your current roster in Chicago, right? And then they're talking about players from their rosters, right? So as these names start to pop up, you have conversations about specific players, and we talk back and forth about players. Obviously with Vooch, I had, from my perspective, when we did talk about him, a very, very high opinion of him as a player. And certainly the way he played against us when we played in Orlando, those two games, he was, incredible the first game. But I've always admired him and respected him as a player in terms of the way he plays the game, his feel, his understanding. At that point in time, when we had those conversations, I didn't know what a trade would look like for him. but there was a possibility that maybe he would become available, right? So Arturas and I had conversations about players, like Vuce. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to take time for him to change, our team. Our team's changed quite a bit, and I don't know if I'm answering the question correctly, Darnell, in terms of what you're asking me, but I'm assuming you're asking me how long it's going to take for him to kind of change our team as a player. Was that the question or no?
No, more specifically, now that you've made a move that essentially says that you're going to go for it, you guys are all in. How would you like to see that mindset change from your players now? And should it?
Well, I would say this, Darnell, and I think I've talked about this, from day one. You want to do things at a real high standard, and I kind of use the word championship standard, right? You may not be a championship level team, or you may never play for a championship for whatever reason, but you want to do things at an incredibly high level that you're going to need to do if you're ever in that situation. So that's never changed for me. I think regardless of what your team is, you want to have standards and an expectation of how you want to play the game. Now, are we going to be perfect on those things? No. Have we fallen short playing? Absolutely. But that's kind of where you're trying to raise the bar to, right? And I don't think that's changed for the guys that were here before Vuce came in. We've talked about that. Being the best version of ourselves, maximizing ourselves, being, as good as we can be, and being competitive and wanting to play in meaningful games. So, as a coach, I've never taken the approach with this group of, hey, let's just see what happens. Let's feel this out. No, we've tried to establish that there's an expectation, a standard of play that we want to be able to play to. The thing that I think is good for the current group that is still part of this, they've heard that message from day one. And Vuce heard that message the other day. So nothing's really changed for anybody in terms of how we're trying to go about being the best version of ourselves and trying to get to a place of playing really meaningful games at the end of the year. So we've tried to do that from day one. Now, that hasn't happened here in a few years, but we're working towards that. And there's been another challenge that's been put in front of us. The first challenge was new coach, new staff coming in, new players, new system, learning this stuff, kind of working things out. Then you kind of go through a period of time. Now a trade happens. Now you got new players coming in, but you still want to talk about a standard, regardless of who's here and how you want to play. And I think that's what we've tried to get across, even to the new guys, about how we were trying to play. So nothing's really changed from my perspective, just because Vuce is here now.
I do have a follow-up question. But to piggyback on that, Billy, it is a difference between playing with a rookie, a second-year point guard, and a third-year center, and replacing two of those guys with a 29-year-old point guard and a 30-year-old center. Does the expectation not change when you implement more veterans and try to do things more in terms of winning now?
The expectation for who, Darnell?
Everyone.
Who's everyone? Who's everyone? I'm sorry, who's everyone?
Players, coaches, management.
I think the expectation's always been high. I really mean that. Like, I don't know if we would have ever made it to the playoffs. I have no idea what would have happened. We had to play 72 games. But we were going to throw everything we had into it to try to play to the best standard, to be the best version of ourselves. With Vuce coming in and Al Farouk coming in and Daniel coming in and Troy coming in and Devontae coming in, yes, that's still the same thing. We're going to have to figure out how we can be the best version of ourselves. How can we play to the highest standard that we can play to as a team? And what are the things that we have to do on a nightly basis to create an identity to be successful? Listen, I've been around enough teams and seen enough basketball. There are teams that are really, really talented that don't do anything. And there's a lot of teams that, I'll give you an example, like last year at Oklahoma City, we weren't supposed to be any good. We were not supposed to be any good. Chris Paul wasn't tolerating that. He didn't walk in there and say, oh, okay, well, you know what, we're not supposed to be as good. We lost Paul George. We lost Russell. No, I think as these guys are professionals, they're pros. These guys have got a lot of pride. And I think you want to set that kind of standard all the time. And I admired Chris Paul about that. You know, that was really something that was powerful inside of our locker room, was his internal belief of, hey, listen, when I'm on a team, we're competing. And I think that you want to have guys that have that kind of mentality. So I get that because Vooch is in and some of the guys that are new are here, that the talent level's been raised. But just because, I always say this, adding talent doesn't take away your problems. And if you think if you're adding talent, it becomes a lot easier, it doesn't. There are things we have to do that were no different than the things we had to do with the previous roster. We still got to run back in transition. Joe, I think, mentioned to me about our defense. If we play defense the way we did against San Antonio, we're not going anywhere. You know, if we get back in transition like we did again, we're not. If we run offense the way we ran offense last night, we're not going anywhere. Now, in fairness to them, it was the first time they played together, and I understand that, and we got to work out some of those things. But whether it's a really talented team or a team that's moderately talented or not very talented, you still have to do the same things night in and night out to win games. And I get there are certain players that offensively can just take over games and win games for you. I get that. I'm not diminishing the importance of talent at this level. It is a talent-driven league. It's a shot-making league. I get all that. But there's still things you can control that you have to do that we've got to do. And I think that's the standard we're trying to play to. The chemistry part, playing with each other, as much as I want to force that and drive that and have that resolved today, I just got to be patient. That's going to take some time. But you know what? These guys have played basketball long enough. We can sprint back in transition. We can physically put a body on somebody. We can physically get over screens. We can screen. We can go to there's things that we can control as we work on the chemistry stuff. So I know that was long, Darnell, but that's just kind of how I feel.
No, the standard is the standard. I get it.
Yes, that's that.
So my actual second question was about practice, and maybe I'm infatuated with practice, but this schedule that you guys have coming up, this every other day schedule, does this present a nice opportunity for you to get in some things that you want to get in, and how will you all be able to use this?
Yeah, I mean, it was good today. I mean, you're not going to do a lot of contact, but you get a chance to get on the court and run around, and these guys can kind of flow and move on things we're doing defensively and things we're doing offensively. So it's good. We needed today, I think, for a film session, we needed today to be able to get on the court and work on the fine tuning of execution of pick and roll coverage, you know, screening action coverages, offensive schemes, what we're doing. We needed that today. And hopefully going into tomorrow's game, we can take another step forward.
Thanks, Billy.
You're welcome.
Right, thanks, Coach. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
you, Billy. Thanks, Billy. Thanks,
See you guys.